Thank you everyone for joining us today and this week for our annual convention. To be remembered as a very interesting convention indeed. I'm joining you from ULCT HQ here in Salt Lake City. And we also have some of our staff broadcasting from the Salt Palace. It's been very interesting. I hope the experience has been good for you as attendees. My name is Nick Jarvis. I am the Chief Operating Officer at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And I am happy to welcome you all here. And just want to say a quick thank you to one of our sponsors, who is the sponsor of this workshop, Republic Services. We rely on our sponsors to help keep our dues low and make these conferences happen. So we'd like to take the opportunity to thank them. Like I said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the League, which means I run all of our internal administration, including our human resources. So this workshop is particularly interesting to me and very timely, as we're all trying to figure out how we're going to go about the new normal as we return to work. So I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Professor Bruce Boucher. He's currently the director of the Masters of Human Resources Executive Program at Utah State University and is an instructor in the graduate and undergraduate programs there. He's also an active HR consultant and executive coach to several companies. Previous to his 3-year sabbatical for the LDS Church, Bruce was the Chief Human Resources Officer for Extra Space Storage. During his 14+ years, Extra Space went from a privately held company with only 150 employees and 38 properties to a publicly traded company with over 3,000 employees and 1,100 properties. Bruce is also the president of Roos Advisors, a business and HR consulting firm. He's a member of the SHRM and has been asked to speak at several local chapter events on HR issues. He's trained as a DISC facilitator and in predictive index. He's also been featured panelist at the annual Burson Learning and Development Conference. He is bilingual and has presented in different international HR and business groups. He currently teaches and consults on leadership, compensation, learning and development, and HR strategy. Professor Boucher has a bachelor's degree from Brigham Young University in International Relations and a Master's of Science degree in Human Resources Management from Utah State University. For 3 years, he served as president of the Puerto Rico San Juan Mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, overseeing the church's efforts on Puerto Rico and 6 Caribbean islands. Bruce and his wife, Becky, reside in Salt Lake City, Utah, and are the parents of 4 children and 6 grandchildren. And with that, Bruce, I'd like to turn it over to you. Very quickly, I'd like to let everyone know, if you have any questions along the way in the presentation, just enter those into the chat. And at the end, we're going to do a Q&A where we'll address all of those. So go ahead and take it away, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Nick. I hope everyone can see me and hear me. And it's nice to be with you. I was with you last year and had such a delightful experience, and had a chance to present in a much different setting. And it was just phenomenal. And I was just delighted when I received an invitation to come back this year. This is a little bit of a different topic that we've had in the past, and it's a little bit of a challenging one. So I'm grateful to be able to be with you, and I'm thrilled to kind of lead you through this. I'm going to talk today about some things that we know, some things that we probably don't know very well, and give you some ideas and some thoughts about directional intent as it pertains to COVID and work. And so I really will look forward to getting some questions from the group, and I'll be happy to answer those. And as Nick said, if you want to submit those through chat, we'll get to them at the end. So I appreciated the introduction, and my bio is probably a little long. Probably the most important thing that Nick said is that I'm married a great lady, and we have 4 wonderful children and 6 beautiful grandchildren. And these days, with what's going on in the world, I'm just grateful to celebrate that, quite frankly. But I also have a job. I have a few jobs, actually, and we're working pretty hard. And it might surprise you to know that in spite of COVID, higher education is going forward in kind of an interesting pace, quite frankly. The Huntsman School of Business at Utah State has seen a pretty flat enrollment this year. Everybody expected it to be down. It's not really. And also the consulting things that I do are continuing to be vibrant and challenging. Now, I realize as I say that that's not the case with many, and I feel grateful for that. I wanted to take you through today sort of what's going on in the HR world, particularly pertaining to COVID-19 and how we might be able to go forward. So I want to start out by sharing a direct quote from one of our students who said, "There's no denying this, it sucks." And so we're on the elevator, and I have a chance to look over at this wonderful individual who's in our graduate program, wonderful lady, and she's one of our day Masters of Human Resource students. And how you doing? How's your family? How are things? And just like, this is one of the more articulate students we have. And she said, you know, there's just no denying it. This sucks. And I think we could probably all agree that we all sort of feel that way. And there are reasons why we do, from worrying about our health or the health of our loved ones, to perhaps going through reductions in force at work or furloughs. Many businesses have put annual increases or bonuses on hold. We've had to change our thinking in so many areas. And you are probably like me, getting bombarded every day by LinkedIn's and other advertisements and other invitations to watch a video or do something that's going to help you overcome this, or that's going to help you work through it. And many of those probably are very helpful, but we've gotten a lot of them. There are a lot of people talking about what to do next. So, but I just want to concentrate on a couple things today that are more foundational, particularly as you manage your cities and towns and some of the challenges that you're going to have with budgets and workers and their health and so forth, and providing the services that you provide. I'm a fan of Utah. I actually grew up in Arizona, and I love driving through the state. And I drive from Salt Lake, where I live, to Logan frequently, and I love to take some of those back roads. You know, I drove the other day by Eden, through Eden, Utah, and what a beautiful valley that's in. And I thought about some of the challenges that town must have going forward. And, you know, I think it's important that we focus on some foundation. And one of those things is that experts will tell you, whether you live in Salt Lake City, work in Salt Lake City, or work in Eden or Peoa or Camas or St. George or wherever you are, that with dramatic change, there seems to be 3 distinct periods. And in those periods, we make our way through difficult things. We're in the middle of difficulty right now in many ways. We might view it as COVID-19. We might view it as the human rights environment or the political environment. One of those 3 periods is the middle one, and it's called the neutral zone. And quite honestly, according to those who wrote Managing Transitions, the neutral zone is the hardest zone. And the reason is not because we aren't really recognizing that change needs to happen. It's that we're sort of in a stasis and we can't seem to figure out what's next, right? If you ask prisoners or POWs or people who are struggling in their lives with certain illnesses or whatever, one of the biggest things that we face during those periods of time is we don't know when it's going to end. We can't see the end, right? And so we have to lift our vision up just a little higher and try to remember what our principles are and what things are important to us. But that neutral zone is where many of us get stuck, and nobody really wants to be stuck in neutral, right? We all want to feel like we're moving forward, even if it's just in a small way. We want to feel like we're contributing in and making a difference. So when experts come on TV and they talk about high school, junior high, and kindergarten and grade school, elementary school kids saying that they want to be in school, or that their parents want them to be in school, it's really easy for us to say, well, there's 1,000 cases of COVID today. Why do you want to go back to school? Well, part of the driving factor here in our human behavior is we want to be out of neutral. And it's that great phrase that my mom always said to us when she would see us as teenagers standing around in the house. Do something even if it's wrong, right? Just do something. And we have a tendency to think that way, but we don't always consider all the factors because we don't control when we're going to be out of that neutral period. No one likes not knowing when this will end. Nobody. We're all assured that it will end or that the vaccine will be developed soon, but we don't really know when. And so that's creates some problems. And everybody thinks, and I love this comment, everybody thinks somebody should know something about whatever, and that there is something not being done that should be done by somebody that knows something, right? Which is a huge mouthful, but that's kind of how we look at it. Isn't there something you can do, township, mayor, school district? Isn't there something you should do? Isn't there something you can be doing? And, you know, the reality is that's a natural reaction. And while it's very, very difficult for you leaders to not take it personally, I'm hopeful that by reminding you of this, we can get back to a foundation of this is normal behavior for folks. It's kind of where they want to be. Not really sort of where they want to be, sorry, but where they are. And quite frankly, our job is to help them manage through that when we ourselves don't know the answers. So is there an upside to all of this? Is there an upside to what's going on? And I wanted to start there because I do want you to see that there's been some really interesting learning and some really interesting things that have happened as essentially the world has changed and been just pivoted 180 degrees in some ways. First of all, I honestly think that in spite of all of these challenges, that many of our people, our employees, our patrons to our businesses, are the people who live in our towns and our cities have actually done really well. And many of them have been extremely thoughtful, extremely patient. And at the end of the day, in a free society, we rely heavily on people exercising good judgment in whatever their view is of good judgment, right? And I honestly think that it's amazing. So as to how well people have done this. I go into a classroom, I have 45 students, and we got them in a larger classroom. They're spread out 6 feet apart, and every single one of them is wearing a mask. Every single one of them used hand sanitizer. Every single one of them has been flexible about the course. And I just think, yeah, this is great. Now, but I also know that everybody isn't that way. But I believe as a general rule, people are trying, and they're trying to act in good judgment, even though sometimes we'll scratch our heads and go, what were they thinking, right? So the second point is teams are clearly moving to the forefront to get work done. I may have talked about this last year. It's been a topic of mine in various settings, but if we want to build more disparity, if we want to build different influences of perspective, if we want to have the beautiful principle of inclusion really matter in our businesses, one way to do that is to rely on teams and to create teams. Teams bring age differences together. They bring gender differences together. They bring race differences together with the idea of just getting work done. And what we're seeing is more and more, because it's difficult to control large groups of people remotely, teams are becoming the key. It's no longer true that people join companies when we hire them. They don't join your town, really. We're hiring you to be an employee of Park City, the municipality of Park City. That's great. What they really just joined is the team that they're going to work in. And that's becoming more and more evident in the data. Teams are what people really care about because that's where they're going to have the most immediate impact on their employment life. And they have become more and more valuable as this COVID issue has raged. And again, by creating teams and relying on teams, we're able to respond to other societal requirements and concerns because we have different parties, different races, and so forth represented. We've had a redo on higher education, which many of you may have seen, and that redo has happened at other levels. And quite honestly, one of the things that we've learned about in higher education is that there's a tried and true model that's been around for a very long time that we all respect, and there's now some new models that are working quite nicely. Thank you very much. So I can run the Masters of Human Resources professional program, which is not on campus in Logan. I can run it online through Zoom now, and I can reach people all over the world and give them the benefit of one of the top Masters of Human Resources programs in the country, this little university in Logan that's really so good at that. And on it goes. But in higher education, I have to say that in spite of some of the changes and the frustrations, we've pivoted pretty well given the circumstances. We're not done yet. We're not perfect. We've got some things that we need to work at. But I've appreciated, especially at Utah State University, the activity that President Cockett and others in leadership have exuded and have taken to communicate and to try to protect our students and still keep the experience meaningful. I'm not sure other levels have been that successful. So I'm not saying, that's what everybody's doing, but we've been very fortunate. We all also realize that technology has kept us afloat. Where would we be without Zoom? Where would we be without the internet and how powerful a tool that's become? We're doing more and more work that way. And again, going back to teams, it's so much easier to link small teams together than it would be to link entire companies and make those experiences meaningful. But we're even getting better at the larger groups. Technology has literally kept us afloat. Speed to market, which is something that you might wonder about, but many companies have reported that they have gone from delivering a software product that was taking anywhere between 2 to 3 months to get done inside of a month because of the ability of these individuals to work in teams, to collaborate more freely, to communicate online, and to actually get things done. They're able to cut down their speed to market requirements. So in the process of work, in some instances, we're actually able to do work faster and still meet the quality that is required. Of course, you know this, the work at home numbers have increased dramatically. Some industries have reported groups and companies that were lower than 25% work at home are now over 80% work at home. And many of them are reporting that they feel like that change has not resulted in a loss of productivity, which is interesting. We went through a period where work at home became kind of something we discussed. And everybody looked at the JetBlue model of having the call center being done from home. And they said, maybe it won't last. There's all kinds of problems with it. And we sort of, that's the pulse point for me that I remember. You may have a different one. And then we went forward from there. And more people started working from home. But in my experience, it was largely people who had health issues or working moms or people who actually lived somewhere else and were high enough of an executive that they were needed, but they didn't want to live in Salt Lake City, so they worked in Denver or something, and all of that. And those numbers were few and specific and sort of one-offs. Now, as you know, we're all doing it, or most of us are doing it, and we found that, abracadabra, it's not all that bad, and that there are some really good things about it. We have also rationalized in many ways, and this is what I'm being told as a consultant and reading, that that what's really important in our work lives, companies, is they've had to review what they're going to keep, what they're going to do, what they're going to deliver, and what they're not going to keep and deliver, are wrestling with this issue. And they're starting to realize that, you know, what we used to do here, and here maybe didn't add value. So you are seeing some programs that are changed or dropped. You are seeing some things that are done, and some have had to make really dramatic cuts. I'm not arguing that the dramatic cuts are good. I'm just suggesting that it's healthy for a company to step back and decide what's really important. I would suggest that it's probably healthy for you folks in cities and towns and the leadership that you provide to decide what you can continue to do and what's really meaningful in keeping the members of your towns and cities safe and supported, right? And I'm sure you're finding that there are some things that you used to do. Because you used to do it doesn't mean that you should continue to do it, and you're questioning that even as we speak. There has been an increased importance placed on HR, but it's specific. It's increased reliance on HR as a business partner. So many people use this only as a tactical afterthought. Get payroll right, get benefits renewed. And some of us are small enough to where we have people on our team who are doing HR largely because they're good at accounting, or because they're good with people, or they've been there a long time and they know everybody. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it fits your model, that's great. What we're finding, though, is more and more leaders are engaging HR to help them with strategic plans that include people. And at the end of the day, the most important asset that any of you have are the people that work for you. And that becomes really, really critical as to how you manage them and plan for them, who's fully engaged, who isn't. If you have to do layoffs or furloughs, how do we decide that? And how do we best treat those people with respect and still do what the city or town needs, for example? These are all important questions, and having that kind of HR support is really important. And I obviously feel strongly about that because that's what I've dedicated my working life to. And so I can just tell you that it's been so interesting to me, the calls that I've received in the last 90 to 120 days. How can we do this? What should we do differently? What's a great way to do it? And it's just been interesting to help those folks take a more people-oriented, long-term view and see the results of those decisions. So if any of you have ever traveled to Europe, you see this wonderful sign, "Mind the Gap." And it's just a sign to remind us to not fall in between the sidewalk and the bus stop, or the sidewalk and the metro stop. And it's all over the UK. And they say it so properly and so profoundly, and you get a kick out of it. But I picked up on this little concept, and I've taught it for a long time, but I thought I'd share it with you today. There's often gaps between HR, or the needs of people, and the needs of the business. We are constantly balancing the needs of our employees or the needs of our townsfolks with what we have to work with, budgets, resources, and so forth. And we're constantly balancing those. And there's no such thing as a perfect balance, right? We're constantly working at this. But in reality, there's a gap. And oftentimes there are gaps that exist frequently, and there are a lot of those gaps. And so we're constantly trying to help sort of mitigate those things and make things better. So is there a downside, or are there gaps that this circumstance has created? Well, yeah, there is. First of all, people are having a hard time unplugging and unwinding, and we're seeing more use of employee assistance programs and mental health kinds of interventions, because people have their computer up and they're working from home, and they feel the pressure to be professional, but they have a 4-year-old who's not going to kindergarten or preschool, and they've got work to deliver, and so they're hacking away at 11 o'clock at night, and the next morning they're up early. And it's just this idea that before I could leave my job and essentially leave my job. Even though I had a cell phone, I could even turn that off. Well, now it's really hard for people to unplug, and it creates a lot of pressure and stress that's going to have an effect on our employees if we're not careful. Another thing that you'll be challenged with is, how do you evaluate work from home? I mean, how do you handle performance when you have staffing changes or reassignments when you're really not able to see them? When we've moved people around or we've retasked them to do other work, how do we know they're succeeding if we can't actually stand next to them and watch? And so our trust in leadership, in our development of leaders throughout our organizations and throughout different verticals, whether it's public utilities or public health or safety or police or whatever it is, how do we know that things are going on? We can't just walk into those outlets and watch people anymore. So that's a downside. We may have too much space and we may have too much overhead, right? We used to have to build large buildings and large footprints because people worked in the building, and we had to make sure that they had access and, so forth and so on. Well, a lot of things are changing there. I don't know if you saw this recently, but Target mentioned that for many of their stores, they're going to cut their stores in half and make them delivery and pickup kinds of outlets. And the other side of those stores will be retail because the boxes are too big. And they're not getting enough walk-in traffic per square foot to justify what they're doing, right? So those are questions you might have. There's a perception by many that there's too little communication. I hear this frequently. Why am I not hearing anything from the so-called leaders of our company or our community? Why are they not communicating with us? We hear from the CDC, we hear from Biden, we hear from Trump, we hear from all these people, but what's going on in Park City? What's going on in Provo? And why am I not hearing from our leaders? So there's a perception that there's way too little communication going on. And we'll talk about why that's important in just a minute. There are too many gaps. There's problems in production flow, logistical decisions, logical decision-making, and normal functions don't seem to be flowing quite correctly. An example of this is the Pac-12, which is not having a football season, and then maybe having a football season, and then not having a football season, but then maybe having a football season, announced this the end of last week or the first part of this week that they're giving bonuses to their commissioner and other people when hundreds and thousands of people who were involved with the athletic programs of these universities have lost their jobs. So timing, line of sight kinds of decisions, being able to watch the product flow and really match production and quality has been very difficult for people. That's a concern that we've heard. So, and then I love this. This is a direct quote, but so the question would be, how do we practice total quality management in production software products that we're producing without total quality management or Six Sigma from home? How do we do that? And I love this quote. The closest I've been to Kaizen is when my 4-year-old grandson puts on an Ichiban headband, right? And I had to laugh when I heard that, because what this person was saying is we had this system, this sort of Toyota system. We did this, then we did this, then we did this, then we did this. And at the end result, we get this wonderful product. Well, we can't do that anymore. And we can't count on that. So how do we make sure that the end product is still good? And that's still a challenge. I love this also, that a staffer said to her boss, I know this is going to shock you, but actually and truly, I miss you. And the truth is, people are isolated and they're lonely. And if you ask so many people, they'll say, well, yeah, I don't really miss it too much. But then when you really push them, they'll say, well, yeah, I guess I do. I miss going to class. I miss going to work. I miss the routine. I miss being able to walk into the coffee shop with my friends. I drove into a Maverick to get some gas on my way to Logan the other day. And every weekday for the last 3 years, there used to be this group of kind of grizzled guys, ranchers kind of guys who would just meet. They take up 2 or 3 tables in the Maverick, and they'd just be there with their coffee or their soft drinks, and they'd just be talking. And I walk in, no one's there. And, you know, I imagine those folks miss that, and they feel that loneliness that comes with it. So how do we mind the gap? What kinds of things can we do to really mind that gap and to really make it meaningful? Well, I think the biggest issue of all is communication, and how we communicate and what we're communicating becomes really, really critical. If we want to go forward at the end of all of this, and we want to still have people's hearts, and we want their heads, and we want them to really love working for our town or our community, and they really want to continue to put their life on the line, or to get up at night and fix that wire or whatever it is, we need to win them and keep them now. We can't wait. We can't say when all this is over, we'll do this again and people will feel valued again. They need us now. And the way for us to get to them now is to really think about how we're communicating. And I just used an HR model here, but communication, we link HR tactics to a specific HR and business strategy. In other words, we're actually doing what we set out to do, and we're relying on communication to do that. We create the culture to execute our strategy through communication, and we change management and process, which we're seeing happen, sort of just blossoming, exploding now, changes that we're seeing. But how do we communicate that, and how do we help people work their way out of neutral, is all dependent on how we communicate. And honestly, I think this is a learnable skill, but I think it really is it's a skill that needs to be developed. And a question for all of you today, rhetorical though it may be, is, are we really communicating, right? Are we really communicating, or are we just throwing something in an email or a newsletter and checking off the box? And I realize that some of that communication is limited because you can't really do it in person, but here's what we find with younger people. If you send them an email, it will rarely be read because they don't care about email. If you want to reach them, you got to text them. You got to Instagram them. You got to use social media. Well, a lot of the people that live in your towns are pretty social media savvy. And it's an inexpensive way to communicate. But it's just one way to communicate so that we can begin to mind these gaps and really sort of figure out what we need to do to help our folks. So what are we doing, right? What am I seeing that people are successfully doing? And you can read this, but ask yourselves this question: what are we doing to mind the gap? Are we being proactive enough? In a crisis, great leaders communicate. If there's a takeaway from this lecture, I hope there's more than one, but I hope you write this one down. Great leaders communicate. And what we need in our cities and towns, in our schools, in our communities, in our hospitals, we need great leaders. This is the time for people to step up. And the way to really get to the point where you're stepping up is to figure out how to best communicate. So I've kind of beaten that horse, but it's just so critical. In a recent survey of HR professionals, here are some suggested do's. A short and frequent pulse survey to check on the organization or organizations. These are surveys that are like 3 questions long. They don't have to be profound questions. They don't have to be things that are onerous. You can even do them over LinkedIn, for example. And they're just really super valuable to kind of find out how people are feeling. Increased and varying communications from you senior leaders or department heads or vertical leaders. These become really important. Virtual town halls. We used to travel executives around and meet with people in person and talk to them about what's going right, what's going wrong, what they like, let them ask questions. Now we can do that virtually. And you know, it's not the same, and we have different feelings about it, but I'd still consider doing it. We have video messages that you can record. Here's the latest on school openings. Here's the latest on street openings. Here's the latest on the damage from the windstorm. That kind of thing could be done with video. and it puts a face with a message. And somehow that helps people feel better about what's going on, right? You know, as a leader, something, and you're sharing it, and they look at you and they go, we're so glad he knows that, or she knows that. We're so glad she's in touch and that she's into the details and that she's willing to talk to us about it, right? Awesome. Open ask sessions to allow people to ask questions of leaders. I know in difficult times, it's sometimes hard to stand before a group of people who are essentially, well, angry, right? Or disenchanted. And in those town meetings, what I've noticed, and I'm not nearly the expert you are, but it seems like the angry people always outnumber the ones that are happy. And so, you know, you get up there and you face that, right? But we'd rather have them asking questions, and we'd rather have the opportunity to talk with them. And that's still the truth, and it's still valuable, even if we have to do it virtually. Weekly smaller roundtables with leaders. You know, we have some distancing issues and mask issues and numeric ceilings that we have to manage, but we can manage that, and we can still do it. And is it okay if you take 30 minutes and actually visit with 25 people? It'd be okay with me. I don't know what your timeline is like, but it would be okay to do that. Virtual team lunches, that's become popular. Virtual hangouts, that's become popular. I don't have time to virtually hang out with anybody, but apparently that's working for people at work. Get to know you scavenger hunts, sharing theme pictures so people feel a little bit more personally connected. Online cookbooks, you know, and that's not a big one on my list, but it might be on yours. And then, you know, one that actually bought a particular company a lot of goodwill and really helped the employees was to have a Grubhub group deliver lunch to a group of employees spread throughout the valley. And then they had a virtual call while everybody was eating lunch. These are just some creative things to help us think about how to communicate. And again, there's no one way to do this. And for example, this is a common mistake. A CEO feels really passionately about what they're going to have to do next. Maybe it involves a riff or whatever. So he does a call, or he sends an email. But what I would be thinking if I were leaders today, and I would hope that my HR team would help me or people around me would help me, is maybe we should do all of it. Maybe we should do a recorded message, an email, a town hall, and a Q&A with employees. Maybe we should try to work out 3 or 4 different things where in the past one would do. Because we need to make sure we reach as many people as possible. And the way they're reached is very different on a personal level. And we need to find that and do it. John Maxwell would tell you that when you get to the very highest level of leadership, you begin to realize that you work for everybody else, and it's important for you to recognize that they're on a different level of leadership. And somehow we have to find a way to mind that gap and communicate from where we are to where they are. And that may suggest that the way we communicate with John is different than the way we communicate with Dave. And we need to just take that into consideration as we're trying to figure out a plan of attack. I like to say that communication is money, it's currency. And even though it's not necessarily direct revenue, because you're not really in sales per se, it is currency. First, we have to make sure we're communicating, and we have to value it like it's money. So first and foremost, here's what we're finding. Number one, we have to get COVID response right. We have to help people be assured that they're safe. And everybody has different levels of safety, and everybody has different levels of understanding this. But in particular, as we consider returning to work or building people, the numbers of people, allowing that to grow as we put them in different places, right? We have to make sure people are safe, and we have to tell them that we're doing the basic stuff well, that the basic stuff has been in place, it's being done well, And we tell people that. And quite honestly, that's one thing that I believe Utah State has gotten right. They have been very direct about masks, about hand sanitizer, about distancing. The buildings are well laid out. The plan is articulated. And I think the comment I made earlier about the students adjusting is part and parcel to that communication. And then I would say this, it's like working with my 4-year-old grandson. Repeat yourself a lot. And it's not that they're young, little people or infants, and we're not talking down to them. It's just they have so much going on. And there's so many worries and so many fears. We have to repeat the message frequently. Second, communicate. In communication, find different ways to reach people. There's no one way. Be authentic and honest. I just dealt with a situation where we had a company that a month or so ago said, you know, come heck or high water, we are not having reductions in force. We're not letting anybody go. We're a family. We're going to be okay. We're going to do it. It's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. And then everybody was invited to a Zoom call, you know, a month later, and without any warning whatsoever, the CEO got up and said, we're going to have to go through a 5% reduction. I'm taking a cut in pay, but we're going to have to reduce 180 people starting today. And any credibility, any type of engagement that company built was destroyed in a 5-minute video. Gone. And to get that trust back, my friend Dr. Jim Davis would tell you it's the hardest thing. It's the hardest characteristic of a leader to change. It's hard to get trust back. And so we just have to be authentic, and we have to be honest about it. If we don't know, say we don't know. If we're worried about it and there's a possibility, we need to leave the door open. But to say, well, it's never going to happen, or that you'll always have a job here, and then riff people a month later is brutal. And we all face those decisions. Just think about how you're sharing them. Be reasonable and invoke change management as needed. Things are not the same. And there will be processes that will have to change. And there will be policies that need to be changed. Somebody called me the other day and said, I have a very high level leader. We invited employees to come back to work. And we scheduled shifts and so forth and did all this. And then the leader stood outside the door and watched for people who were arriving late, and then wanted to talk to all the employees that arrived late after they spent 5 or 6 months working from home and going through all of this. We're going to worry about 5 minutes of being late, right? Maybe we need to be a little bit more sensitive and think about the policies that we think we're going to enforce before we get to a point where we're really going to enforce them. And I would invite all of you to think about things like that so that we don't stumble over them as we begin to bring people back or increase the numbers of people that can be with us and so forth. Are we being people friendly? We can still get work done, by the way, and be people friendly. In fact, one point that you should probably know is the companies that get the people issues of the business right on the New York Stock Exchange typically outperform other companies by 25%. So these people issues and getting them right matter. Having people's hearts and their minds matters. And what you do and how you communicate matters in that. So finally, in going forward, empathy, I mentioned trust, but I would tell you that right now, today, the thing that I hear most about is empathy. Empathy may be the #1 leadership characteristic needed today because, you know, people are going to bring stuff with them to work. When I first started my career, there was this unwritten golden rule. You never bring your personal life into a professional setting. We still probably hope for that today, but the truth of the matter is these people think you work for them and not the reverse. And so they're going to bring stuff with them. They have difficulty, they have stuff going on in their homes, they have all kinds of challenges. Because of this, because of racial inequality, because of whatever's going on, they're going to have challenges, and they're going to bring that to work. And what they need is some sort of empathy. And our ability to listen and help point them back in the direction of getting work done, but realizing we still care about them, is really, really important. And it's becoming a very important leadership characteristic. Now, there's one other thing I want to share, and then I'd love to get to your questions if there are any. There is an opportunity here. And it may sound like sort of a crass way to look at it, and I don't mean it to be that way at all. But there are still jobs that are being posted. There's a lot of talent on the table right now. There are a lot of good people who would love to work and make a contribution. So I would encourage you to become entrepreneurs of talent. Entrepreneurs take risks, but they're also constantly churning about what their entrepreneurial spirit is driving them towards. I would love to see you folks of the Utah cities and towns think in an entrepreneurial way about talent. And towns that have the right talent win. They somehow get it done. And when chips are down, people make it happen. Your only asset really is people. And so now is an opportunity to get better. It's an opportunity for you to step forward. And there's always room, as you know, and somebody's grandfather probably told you, there's always room in an organization for really, really good people. That's still true today, in spite of the numbers of people that are not working. There are great people on the sidelines who want to get in the game. Let me give you an example. Nick mentioned that I served 3 years in Puerto Rico for our church, and we loved Puerto Rico. It was great. We watched a complete brain drain in Puerto Rico because of an economic crunch and crisis. And we watched people, individuals, well-educated, engineers, computer scientists, et cetera, leave the island to come to the United States and work, right? So I still have ties with a lot of people in Puerto Rico. And an interesting thing is happening right now. The city of Caguas in Puerto Rico, I have some friends that work at hospitals and other things in the city of Caguas. They figured it out. And here's what they figured out. They have jobs, and they have good jobs. And so they're reaching back out to the people who left Puerto Rico years ago because of the economic conditions, and they're inviting them back because they're entrepreneurs of talent, and they know that talent is on the sidelines. And they're going out and they're finding it. And so just as a challenge to each of you, as you work your way through this very, very difficult time and these very, very difficult circumstances, and they are, I would just invite you to recognize that there really is a need, perhaps more so than ever, for you to be entrepreneurs of talent, to really go out and get it. Now, I post a lot of jobs. I have a lot of people who follow me, and a lot of companies ask me to share their jobs. I have posted several for Salt Lake City, for Salt Lake County, for Weber County, for Park City, for Summit County, and maybe a few others. I know that you have some positions that are going to be critical to you. And I know that there's a lot of talent on the sidelines. Please be entrepreneurs of talent. It's delightful to be with you. And again, I hope that we can all exercise a higher level of communication, mind these gaps, and recognize that now's the time for leaders to step forward and communicate concisely, clearly, and with integrity. And as we do that, we'll make it through this. We don't know when we're coming out the other side, but we are going to come out the other side, and it'll be fun to be a part of all that. And you'll look back on these moments and go, that was really hard, but man, what an experience. I'll never forget it. I wish you all well, and I'm grateful to be invited and be with you today, and I'd love to take any questions if you have any. So I guess, Nick, I'll give it back to you, and I'll stop sharing, and we'll just go to questions.
All right. It looks like we have got one from David Kitchen. He is asking, how do we attract USU HR student programs to serve in the public sector? So getting some of those master's students into our shops.
Yeah, yeah. And this is going to be really simple, right? I mean, all you have to do is send me an email. Bruce, B-R-U-C-E .Boucher, B-O-U-C-H-E-R @usu.edu. Just send me an email and tell me what your interest is, and I'll get you into the Huntsman School. Now, let me tell you about the Huntsman School. Huntsman School, accounting, finance, IT support, HR support, probably all very, very credible, wonderful programs. And we see our top 2 or 3 or 5 students go to the top 50 employers throughout the country. But there's another group of individuals who are top-notch, well-trained students who need opportunities, who want to stay in Utah and want to make a contribution to our state. Now, the MHR program is similar. We're outplacing our students with the top firms in the world, quite frankly. And we also have a lot of people who work in Utah who come back to school to get their MHR degree. We would love to have more opportunities to place those students. Please use us. I mean, our goal, you're in essence, you're our end client. We want those students to work for you. And I can just tell you, they're going to be prepared. So let's connect. I'd love to help you. And we can do, we're interested always in internships. The students who are between their junior and senior years are required to do some internship type things. We'd love to have internship placements, and we'd love to have placements after they graduate. Thanks for the question. I feel a little self-serving there. I hope that's okay.
Of course. And we had another question asking for you to repeat the email address, but I just went and shared it in the chat. So
Bruce.
You can reach Bruce that way.
Yeah, please do. Please reach out to me. Happy to do it.